Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Path to DevOps series. I'm Shiki and today we're going to complete 1/3 of the necessary work to get our deployment pipeline up and running. As mentioned previously, this is the design that I proposed for the deployment pipeline, and we basically have 3 work items to complete. The first one is to configure and create the YAML manifests, which will be used to deploy to Kubernetes. The second is to write the pipeline YAML code which will deploy our applications using these manifests to Kubernetes. And third is to create our infrastructure in Azure Cloud, which will consist of an AKS cluster, Azure Kubernetes Services cluster, and a MySQL server which we will initialize. So without further ado, let's start on our first work item, creating the Kubernetes manifests. Last time we talked, I proposed we create some sort of YAML template that we can use in order to deploy any of our 3 microservices into Kubernetes. And in order to find the template, which is basically the common ground that we can parameterize and deploy, we need to look at each of the YAML files that are specific for every microservice. And in this case, in this example, to just showcase my thought process, I will be using Kubernetes deployments. And I have here the Kubernetes deployment file for the Cart API app or the Cart API microservice. Now, let's compare this with the product API, which basically they're both Java backends. And if I compare them, you can see a very recurring pattern. It's basically the string, which is the name of the application, pretty much everywhere. And there's also this tag here for the Docker image that we're trying to deploy under this deployment. So basically, I could do some file manipulation in the pipeline and insert these strings here and basically have a common deployment template for both backends. But what if I can go even one step further and also have the same template for the front end? And you will look at the comparison between Cart API, which is a Java backend, and the front end. And you'll see that the extra difference is also the container port. And I can create a parameter for this one too. So pretty much what I'm trying to obtain is a single deployment file with a lot of tokens here, and those tokens can be replaced using file manipulation techniques inside of the pipeline. Nothing complex. It's just like placeholders which will get replaced in the pipeline with their actual values. So now that we have established that we can replace these tokens, this is the strategy we're going to go with, and I will show you the final result. By the way, you can download the final result from my Path to DevOps _Azure_DevOps repository, and you can see here we have the Kubernetes manifest. And this is how it looks. I've parameterized both a service, because we need a service to be able to make the applications communicate with one another, and also for us to access the front-end application. So we will deploy a service with each of the microservices, and we will also have a deployment, and I've also added some resources in here. I didn't parameterize those because they're pretty much consistent. It's fine with the values we have here. But if you look here, what I've done is I've created this, let's say, token language, where any token will begin with a pound key and then an accolade, and it will end in a closed accolade and another pound key. So everything that sits between these tokens is basically going to be replaced in the pipeline with the actual value of this. Now you might ask, well, okay, you plan on replacing these tokens, but how are we going to replace these tokens? And Azure DevOps has a plugin for a task which is called Replace Tokens, and it does exactly this. But in the off chance you're using an Azure DevOps organization which doesn't allow you to install custom plugins from the marketplace, and you won't be able to get that Replace Token task, I also created a PowerShell script which you can run in your pipeline, and this is how we're going to do it ourselves. But basically what this script does is it converts everything contained by these 2 delimiters into the value of that variable. So if I have a variable called foo with the value bar, and that variable called foo is trapped between these two delimiters. When I run the script, at the end, I will replace the delimiters and the name of the variable, which is foo, with its value. And I will have bar in there. So I won't go through the script. You have a lot of comments here and it's pretty straightforward, so you can follow along if you want to and read the script, use it, test it. What I'll do instead is I will test the script for you. So I will open my VS Code window and you can see it here, and I have this script right here as well downloaded. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a new file, but first let me just copy this one. Yeah, let's test.txt, and inside of here I will put my file. It doesn't even need to be YAML, yeah, so the script doesn't care about formats at all. So what I'm going to do is I'll replace this one here with app name as well. And all I need to do now is declare an environment variable. So env app name, and let's give it the value of random string. Okay. And now I can call my PowerShell script, and the input file path will be test.txt. And when I hit enter, you will notice that my tokens got replaced with the value of the variable. Okay, so that's exactly what's going to happen in the pipeline in our case when we run this script against this YAML manifest. We will replace all of these tokens with their values, and then this faulty YAML file that we have here will actually become a usable YAML file we can deploy to Kubernetes. One final thing before heading off, we need to move our ticket into a resolved status. And I'm not going to close it just yet. I will close it after we test the pipeline and we see that the manifests are working as supposed. But right now the ticket is resolved as I've created the reusable manifests. All we need to do is now to create the pipeline and ensure that the pipeline contains these variables so that they can be replaced. Okay, this is very important. If you don't have these variables in the pipeline, everything will fail. So we need to ensure in the pipeline that we have these variables for each microservice. Then we just need to take the manifest, run the replace tokens script, and then we need to deploy the manifest to Kubernetes. That's all we have to do. But all of this in the next episodes, because this is it for today. We've created our reutilizable manifests, and I know for some of you, you might have heard of other better mechanisms to deploy to Kubernetes, stuff like Helm, for example. And don't worry, we will get to use Helm in a future video. But right now, I'm just taking you through the path to DevOps as you might discover it on your own. Yeah, so the first thing you would do is you would deploy things to Kubernetes using a YAML file. I'm not suggesting you write a production pipeline using this kind of YAML manifest. This is very rudimentary. I'm not suggesting to go with this approach at all. It's just the normal progression of things as you learn about DevOps principles and about Kubernetes. Yeah. So again, a pipeline is an automated process that does whatever you want it to do. And in our case, we're just automating via some scripting the process to deploy to Kubernetes using YAML. Join me on the future episodes where we will create the infrastructure and the pipeline and we'll bring this whole process to life, deploying to Kubernetes. If you're still here as you're hearing these words, thanks a lot for giving me your time. And I want to wish you a great day, and also just like and subscribe if you feel like it. Thanks a lot. Have a great one. Cheers.